I'm going to be the opening. I'm going to do the moderator of the first half.
Yeah. Can you just tell her? Come later, probably. Bye bye.
No, it's coordinator, of course. Don't worry.
I think it will. It's on. Uh,
We're ready when you are. The green light.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our scheduled agenda. Currently, we have the first of the parallel sessions. And I would just very quickly like to present our moderators for today. We have Dr. Yasmin Afina, a researcher at the United Nations Institute for Disarmament, and also Dr. Giacomo Persi Paoli, Head of Security and Technology Program at UNIDER. So if we could welcome them, that would be very nice, and we can get started. Thank you. And applause, yes.
Thank you. And good morning or good afternoon.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I'm Giacomo Persi Paoli. I'm the head of the Security and Technology program at UNIDIR, and it is truly my pleasure to be the moderator of the first half of this session. We have quite a few things we would like to discuss with you, and we're very pleased to have the opportunity to launch, in occasion of this REAIM summit, the publication that you see on the screen behind me, which is the result of months of quite intense and productive regional consultations that we had the privilege to facilitate and support in cooperation with Spain, with the ROK, the Republic of Korea, and the Netherlands, to really try to capture, in between summits, what have been the different regional perspectives, how have they evolved in the course of the last couple of years. This is the second iteration of these regional consultations. We did a similar exercise in between the first and the second REAIM summit, and it was really eye-opening in a way to really understand how different regions perceive the topic of AI and of responsible AI in the military domain in very different ways. So what was interesting as we repeated this round of consultations was to see how states have evolved their perception of the risks, their perception of the opportunities, but also what concrete steps they have taken to try to put governance frameworks around this very interesting technology and its emerging application in the defense and military context. So this session has, I would say, three segments. We will start with a very short presentation by my colleague Yasmin. She will be giving you a brief overview of what were the main findings of these consultations, and you can download a copy of the report scanning the QR code on the screen behind me, and it's available on UNIDIR's website if you would like to see it in its entirety. We will then have we will go back in a way, at least virtually, in time, to the regional consultations that we had, and have discussions with 3 of the 4 hosts of our regional consultations to really try to understand their perspectives and their lessons. And then after a short break, we'll be reconfiguring the stage, and we will continue the discussion with a multi-stakeholder panel that will be moderated by Yasmin. So in an hour, we have a lot to do, so I will stop with my opening remarks, thanking you again for taking the time to join us, and I would like now to invite my colleague Yasmin to run us through the main findings of the report. Yasmin, over to you.
Thank you, Giacomo, and good morning or good afternoon. I'm not sure what to say at noon. So it's really a pleasure for me to be in A Coruña today, because it really feels like a culmination of months of work and partnerships that have been truly fruitful for the regional consultations of responsible AI in the military domain in 2025. And I had the pleasure of partnering with colleagues on stage here and those that will be joining later for the facilitation of these consultations. And as Giacomo mentioned, we published today a report that summarizes the key findings from the regional consultations, which we can download on our website. I was planning also to distribute flyers, but unfortunately they're stuck on a lost luggage somewhere in Spain or Geneva. So very quickly, first, the report has an entire section dedicated to taking stock of national views, policies, and good practices. It looks at perceptions over risks, but also opportunities that we have explored with states. But it also helped to take stock of what states see as their national policy priorities, especially as it had been a year since the first edition of the regional consultation. So we wanted to really see how these national priorities may have evolved over time, and also what has changed and what has not changed, and perhaps what are some of the things that have been reinforced over time. We also took stock of national and regional good practices, because as we also wanted to acknowledge that states and regions are ramping up on efforts to implement and operationalize responsible AI in the military domain, we really wanted to ask them, so what are the good lessons that you would like to share with the international community? So we really tried to capture those in the report in the hope that this can be a source of inspiration for other states and stakeholders. Second, the paper includes views on from the multi-stakeholder representatives of each region, because we wanted to also acknowledge the role of the multi-stakeholder community, and we also wanted to make sure that we platform underrepresented regions and the representatives of these multi-stakeholder communities. So we had representatives from industries, academia, civil society, 3 of which will be joining us later on stage. But it's been truly enriching to hear from them directly what are some of the priority areas that they perceived with regards to responsible AI in the military domain. We also conducted thematic deep dives on the substance. So we looked at, for example, wider security considerations and how they relate to AI in the military domain. We looked at risks of regional destabilization, dual use and proliferation risks, responsible procurement practices, but also the nexus between AI and nuclear command and control systems that a particular region particularly saw as a priority. And then we also conducted thematic deep dives for the governance of responsible AI in the military domain. So we looked at knowledge and capacity building, trust building, but also the human element, and really tried to unpack from the perspective of the multi-stakeholder community in each region, what are some of these elements. Third, and in response to, again, the importance of the multi-stakeholder community and engaging with them, an innovation that we brought this in 2025, but also sourced from an idea that emerged from the 2024 regional consultations, we held a multi-stakeholder tabletop exercise. So basically we had states and the multi-stakeholder community regrouped together to reflect on key questions where public-private partnerships would be important and where this kind of conversation between states and the multi-stakeholder community would be needed. So we particularly focused on procurement and what are some of the assurances that could be prioritized and implemented for the responsible procurement of 3 capabilities. So one is AI-enabled electronic warfare, one is AI-based swarm for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and the third one is AI for decision support systems. So we really tried to collect views, and you will see some very interesting graphs actually to see where do the priorities lie in each region, what are the commonalities or perhaps divergences in the way that they wanted to implement and adopt these assurances. And then we also looked at post-crisis management and how to manage basically post-incident with regards to the use of responsible AI in the military domain. And finally, the final part of the paper, it was truly to reflect on the REAIM journey, because now that it's been 3 years since the first summit in The Hague in 2023, we thought it was also time to look back and reflect what has worked, where could there be room for improvement, and what are some of the areas that perhaps states in the multi-stakeholder community would have liked to see a bit more emphasis on. And then we also wanted to look ahead, because it's great to reflect on the before, but then how can we use and leverage these lessons to look ahead for the future governance of responsible AI in the military domain, whether it's within REAIM and beyond. And for that, we included recommendations that were issued from the consultations that are both substantive, so really looking at areas that states would like to see more reflections on, but also practical, so practical actions. So for example, we saw a lexicon of different confidence building measures, but also different terms. We also wanted to see a repository, for example, of centers of excellence and establishing a network of it, support efforts to co-design guiding principles with industries to translate the agreed principles of responsible AI into operationalizations of measures. And also I think one of the key terms that we saw, and I'm gonna stop there, is states wanted to see a long-term strategy and vision for REAIM. Where are we going there? What is the role of REAIM in all of this amidst, for example, the growing avenue in the context of the United Nations? So on that note, I do invite you to download the report to see in more detail what are some of the key findings, and we do hope that you find it useful, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Yasmin. To reiterate the invitation to really have a look at the report, because we can really see how beyond the general recognition that this is an important topic, developments really have to be taken into account the regional context, whether it's the regional threat perception or the priorities of different regions, of states within those regions. So having a sense of what are the different regional perspectives really adds that level of granularity and understanding about what are the steps that are needed to really make a concrete step forward in this context. So I would like now to turn to the second segment of this session, really trying to hear from the hosts of at least a selection of the regional consultations that we had last year, and try to understand from their perspectives what emerged from these consultations. So I'm very happy to have a set of distinguished speakers here on stage with us. Starting here on my immediate left, we have Stephan Klement, the EU Special Envoy for Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. We have Major Jamal Hassan from the Ministry of Defense of Kenya. We have Pascale Vincent, the head of Arms Control and OSC Department at the Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs, France. And last but not least, we have Ambassador Bilal Ahmad, the permanent representative of Pakistan to the United Nations in Geneva. I would like, Ambassador, to start with you, actually, and to take us back to the consultations we had in Islamabad. This was the first time that Pakistan was hosting a REAIM regional consultation, and it would be great if you could give us what are your main takeaways from these consultations that we had with you in Islamabad.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor and asking us about our experience in hosting the regional consultations. Indeed, Pakistan hosted the regional consultations for the first time last year in June. But it was, for us, a culmination of our, very keen participation in the REAIM process since its beginning. Now we are in the third summit, and Pakistan has been part of it since the first one. So it was from the perspective that, as you know, Asia is a large continent with significant sub-regions as well. We had 17 states that participated from 3 sub-regions in Asia: South and West Asia, Central Asia, and Middle East. Some of the countries that were participating in our regional consultation were participating for the first time. So this was also very important that the REAIM consultations and the dialogue roped in a number of countries that had not been part of it before. So this was, I think, very important in terms of the outreach of the process. And this was also what Pakistan has been calling for, to expand consultations, have views from stakeholders that have, in the past 2 years, not been part of the process. Secondly, it is very important, the sub-regional context in Asia. Because being a large continent, different sub-regions have different priorities, different threat perceptions, different ideas. If you look at the South Asia, West Asia, we do have Pakistan and India, 2 nuclear neighbors. We have Middle East, which is relatively richer part of Asia, but there are technological gaps. There is Central Asia, where there is a lot of need for capacity building. So all 3 sub-regions actually bringing in something unique from their own perspective. As you know, this consultation was also taking place in June. Now this timing is also very particular, not how it was planned, but as it turned out to be. In May, there was a conflict between Pakistan and India, 2 neighboring countries, 2 nuclear countries, where a lot of lethal autonomous weapons were used. This is a very particular area where it's a nuclear flashpoint, and with compressed decision-making time available here, the threat in itself, but also the timing and a possible use of AI and an irresponsible use of AI could bring havoc, could create a global disaster. So this is very important from the South Asian perspective. Also in June, there was a conflict between Israel and Iran. Now that brought its own insecurities in the region, how the Middle Eastern countries think about it, what are their future threat perceptions. And all the same, of course, with Central Asia having links both to West Asia as well as Middle East. So this was a unique timing. So this consultation was not about theoretical concepts, as generally experts tend to come and look at a problem that is somewhere in future. this was very much in real time. So there was a lot of realism, real focus on what can possibly happen, and some of it, all of them could see what was happening and had happened in a couple of months. Bringing them together, what we learned, some of the lessons that we can share were, there was some convergence on the core guardrails. For example, there was emphasis on meaningful control and judgment of the use of AI. There was also a lot of emphasis on responsibility, assigning responsibility, and ensuring accountability. And last but not the least, a lot of emphasis on respect of international law, in particular, international humanitarian law. Another element that came out from these discussions was the need for capacity building. Some of the countries with their own developmental level, a need was identified that the knowledge base was not very broad and also not very deep. So one of the contribution of this consultation was that when all the participants came, they shared a lot of knowledge. We had support from partners in REAIM as well. So there was a lot of knowledge sharing, which was appreciated. But importantly, knowledge gaps lead to governance gaps. So this is something which is very important as we build this format forward on how to enhance the knowledge base as well as build capacity. Last but not the least, there was a lot of emphasis on the importance of regional and sub-regional confidence building measures. So the absence of these confidence building measures generates a lot of anxiety, which was conveyed by different participants. And the emphasis was that in addition to the CBMs in conventional and other areas, there was also a need to have confidence building measures on discussions on AI. Overall, it was good that the discussions were inclusive. They reflected regional and sub-regional realities, and the emphasis that Pakistan is very keen on is respecting international humanitarian law. And these discussions, given the environment that we operated in, were undertaken with a lot of realism and urgency and the call for balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a very quick follow-up, if you don't mind, also building on what you mentioned around the importance of maintaining this engagement at the regional and sub-regional level. Now, we know that the discussions on the military domain are now starting to emerge also in the UN context. There have been 2 consecutive resolutions of the first committee. There are later this year consultations that are scheduled to happen in Geneva on this topic. But how do you see platforms like REAIM and the regional consultations that it has promoted and supported? How do you see these platforms continue to be complementary to whatever discussions will be happening at the global level in the UN?
No, thank you. I think you've raised a very important question of where we place REAIM in the global discourse on AI. You're absolutely right. For the last 2 years, there have been resolutions. Pakistan has supported those resolutions. There was a Secretary General's report, and the report would lead to informal discussions in June this year. But this is not the only place. There has been Working Group 2 on the Disarmament Commission, which has been discussing AI. Pakistan has been raising specifically the importance of this issue under Agenda Item 5 of the Conference on Disarmament. You already know that in the CCW, in discussion on laws, there's a lot of talk about AI as well. So the UN, various bodies in the UN have been deliberating this issue as well. I will first focus on what are the positives of REAIM. So what does REAIM bring to this whole discussion? Firstly, I think the quality of discussion. As I earlier mentioned, in regional consultations, bringing in more actors, bringing in more perspectives, and the time that we have been able to dedicate has given a lot of depth to the discussion. So I think the quality is something that is coming forward. And also with it, the knowledge and capacity building, especially for developing countries and developing actors. That is very important. REAIM has also been a very good platform as an incubator of ideas, which in UN forum where the discussions, of course, are limited and circumscribed in the mandate of everybody. But here there is a free-flowing discussion, a lot of ideas that have been shared. Indeed, as we are hosting a session on regional engagement, so fostering this regional engagement, both from the security perspective, from the strategic, and from the tech perspective as well. And the structured way in which this inclusive and early engagement is very beneficial to the discussions that take place on AI in the UN platform. But at the same time, I think we have to acknowledge what the limits are for REAIM. For example, we know that not all major powers are part of REAIM. So that is something that we need to take into account, and which leads us to a belief that while REAIM, as you mentioned, can be complementary to the discussions taking place in the UN, it cannot be a substitute of that. But at the same time, while UN is indispensable for building international law and international guardrails, responsible use of AI with universal participation, REAIM can certainly complement that. The understanding that we achieve over here, I'm sure a lot of actors from the governmental level as well as from the private sector who are here bring in perspectives, and those perspectives I'm sure will be taken to discussions at the UN as well. So it is in its complementarity that the strength of REAIM really lies. How do we proceed from here? How to increase that complementarity? I think the idea is to keep it as complementary and not seek replacement of the UN processes, because UN has an established universal participation, all states participate there, and any guardrails in terms of responsible AI should emerge from there. They can be built over here but taken over there, and with participation of every state. There is also a very important aspect to build convergences, have discussions within the REAIM on a stock taking on what's happening in the UNGA, what's happening at the GGE. So REAIM could possibly include sections when it meets next time, focusing on taking stock on what is happening at the UN, what are the challenges there, and how REAIM countries who have developed a partnership on responsible AI can contribute towards that. But lastly, also, I think there is a need for building synergy with the UNIDIR processes. I think a couple of them, for example, the UNIDIR's proposal for CAIPS, as well as the RAISE conference. I think these are the areas where there is more scope for participation between UNIDIR and the REAIM process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. I would like now for you to join me on a kind of a virtual hop from Islamabad to Nairobi. And we're now moving to the consultation that were held in Kenya. And Jamal, if you don't mind, this is the second time that Kenya is hosting or was hosting the REAIM consultations. So what are your observations on the evolution that you have witnessed, or the trajectory that the continent has been on between the first and the second round of consultations?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Giacomo, and thank you for having me in this distinguished panel. Indeed, it's a great honor for us as Kenya to be able to host the regional consultations twice. And I hope it's not because of the beautiful safaris and the wonderful barbecues that you'll get in Kenya, which I still invite you all to visit Kenya and enjoy. But I guess it's a recognition of how Kenya is standing out as a leader in this particular domain. And just before taking you through the evolution, I'd also like to invite everyone to also download, I think, the first initial report, and also the second report that has been done, which is a remarkable job, as also that will form the basis of you understanding how the evolution has been. Allow me to start by a very provocative observation that we've realized over the past 2 years. So 2 years ago, when we started, or when you hosted the first Africa regional consultation, so everyone in our region were basically asking one key question: why should Africa care about military AI? And what we have observed in the second regional consultation is that the question has totally been flipped, and now African states are actually asking, how do we ensure we shape the rules that are going to determine the governance of military AI? And this particular shift in mindset is totally everything, because it has allowed us to really have an observation on the thinking and how striking it is for us as a continent. So in 2024, for example, we had conversation dominated by North Atlantic perspective and Western technological concerns. But this time round, so African voices are not just present, they are driving literally the agenda. So what we have seen, we're having some of the states talking about the drone swarms in Sahel and how it's using to counter terrorism operations, about data sovereignty and sovereign AI, and who controls AI systems which are deployed in the African soil. And importantly, about ensuring that the responsible AI frameworks don't become another form of tech colonialism. I think this was a very critical observation that we saw. Secondly, which was also quite interesting, is that the conversation has now matured from just abstract principles to really hard operational illusions or questions. So you have, for example, military professionals are now asking, how do we test AI systems that are going to be deployed in resource-constrained environments? Because this is the reality of the African context. Secondly is, what does meaningful human control look like when we lack sophisticated infrastructure? And thirdly is, how do we ensure that international norms don't sacrifice African security realities? We do all appreciate that the African security reality is a bit different, and the potential of how AI is going to exacerbate these particular conflicts in the various parts of the continent is critical for us to consider this juncture. And we have seen that the regional consultation provides an opportunity for all of us to engage and have these discussions. So these questions do matter, and we've seen that it's how the evolution of the regional consultation has been. Thirdly, and what is also very critical, and it's something that's quite exciting for us to see, that we have seen that actually more women, more young people, and more technologists are at the table. So for example, you'll find a 20-year-old researcher from Uganda, for example, sitting next to a general who is from Nigeria, discussing about little autonomous weapon systems. Actually, interesting enough, the biography of our participants in the first regional consultations were actually senior military officers. And in the second one, you found people who were mostly uniquely focusing on AI, which was quite interesting in how it was enriching the discussion. So as a result, you get both innovation, ethical grounding, and importantly, a generational commitment to getting things right just from the start. As such, now the question will be, what's the trajectory of how we are going to go? And what we have seen as the African continent, especially from this regional consultation, is that now we are moving just from being passive recipient of global norms to active architects of continental governance. And this is a trajectory that we want to take, and our analysis is that this particular trajectory is going to be irreversible. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal. Just a very quick follow-up for you as well. First of all, thank you for giving us an overview of the remarkable journey and the remarkable trajectory over the course of just 1 year, which isn't much time if one thinks about it. So reflecting back on that journey, what do you think has been the impact that REAIM and all that came with REAIM has had on the trajectory of the continent?
I mean, the impact of what we have seen in terms of REAIM can be quite multifaceted, I think. And for our view, that this is just only the beginning from how we look at it. So first, what it has done is it has legitimized the African agency in all these discussions. So before REAIM, military AI governance was just viewed as a conversation for the technologically advanced North. But now REAIM has decisively, in a way, shifted the narrative and to allow the different regional perspective to actually be captured. So we, as a continent, we are not just considered as partners, but passengers, but we are also considered as authors of this particular journey. And secondly, it has created an interesting feedback loop between national and international conversation. I think when we started the regional virtual consultation before the first REAIM summit at The Hague, this was one of the unique proposals we provided as Kenya, why it was uniquely enough for each particular region to have an opportunity for them to discuss and share. in the global REAIM. And it's exciting that to see that right now we are going hopefully to the third iteration of this. So, and then the third thing is that it has built an African epistemic community where to allow different researchers or capability around the area on military AI. So we have people within the defense, we have legal, and we have academia, civil society, professionals. So we have built a capacity around how people can be able to really fully understand this. And now the question will beg, oh, fine, we've done all this wonderful thing, and this is the impact of the REAIM initiative. So where do we go from here? As Kenya, we actually see some of the ways in which we can be able to now take the REAIM conversation to operationalization is we have to really operationalize the things we discuss ruthlessly. Statements and communiques are just, very fine. But what matters is actually the implementation. And that's usually a lot of the challenges that we face, and how can African states, one way or another, embed these particular insights, either into doctrine, procurement standards, training curricula, and legal review processes. Kenya has already embarked on this. I think last year, together with our partners, the Netherlands, we are now embarking on a series of training of military professionals, specifically in AI, to try and build that particular capacity. And that now translates to my second point, which is building the African capacity and not dependence. We try as much as possible, and this is what there is discussion in the previous regional consultations, where we do realize that Africa is a consumer of technology, and it's high time we now become producers of the same technologies for our environment. And thirdly is that we need to speak with one voice in all these global forums, one way or another, and also to ensure that this particular REAIM initiative remains inclusive. I think for us, the beauty about REAIM, from what we have seen, it's multi-stakeholder character. It allows for different views to be captured in. The civil society, you have the academia, you have the private sector, who now, it's not just about the defense sector, but all the people. And knowing the dual use of AI is actually imperative for us to have this discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's now take the last leg of our virtual trip takes us from Kenya to Geneva, where France and the European Union co-hosted our regional consultation for Western Europe and North America. So I would like to start with you, Pascale, if you don't mind. What are, in your views, some of the underexplored issues that emerged from the consultations that we had in Geneva? And if you could think of like the top two more practical takeaways or recommendations that you think participants put on the table during those consultations.
Thank you very much, Giacomo, for having me. So France, indeed, together with the EU and Germany, had the pleasure to hold the European North America regional consultations in Geneva last June. We had about 80 people, including representatives of 42 states of the region, as well as civil society representatives. The meeting gave us the opportunity to share views on the first two REAIM summits and our expectations for the next one. We were also able to have to go into a deep dive discussion on the human element and what it does look like throughout the military AI life cycle, which means including the earlier phases with legal reviews, the development and programming phase, through also the defining of operational framework, the deployment phase, and decommissioning phase. So maybe to answer your first question, what really stood out was the agreement of all participants on the need to engage more with the private sector and industry. Industries need to be made aware of their obligations. For that, it is necessary to distinguish the role of states, which are responsible for enacting legal obligations and guiding principles, from that of private companies, which have to implement them. And it's also necessary to determine which actors are responsible at which stages of the life cycle of the AI-enabled systems, and to integrate end users in the different stage of weapon development, hence the interest of a multi-stakeholder approach integrating institutions and private actors such as the REAIM. And the industry itself is demanding a clear normative framework in order to navigate safely the market. They in turn demand that their interests be taken into account. So it's therefore necessary for manufacturers, SMEs, and startups to be part of this conversation. Civil society is also expecting more Koreans from state in the proliferation of initiatives related to military AI, particularly in terms of governance, as well as to promote more connections between the different communities, states, NGOs, AI technicians, and industries. One theme that had maybe been less covered in previous discussions was frugal AI. Frugality can be defined as the need to optimize an AI-enabled system in an environment in which resources are limited. This is particularly relevant when it comes to military AI applications, given the context in which the armed forces operate. This involves promoting frugal behavior, such as only using AI when it's needed, and also improving the resilience and durability of the systems and working on curbing costs. Maybe if I come to your second questions on the specific recommendations, let me say that all states agreed on the need to operationalize the principles resulting from the REAIM summits of 2023 and 2024. We already have the building blocks that will allow us to shape an international governance for military AI that can be fit for purpose. It means a governance that is realistic and able to tackle the challenges and issues of the current strategic and security context, which is very challenging. And the REAIM process is a knowledge-based endeavor that will need to keep relying on an up-to-date knowledge of the technical developments as they continue to unfold, and a platform for discussing the most critical issues to come together around shared voluntary principles. Therefore, the next step is to operationalize these principles still through this multi-stakeholder approach. To conclude, maybe two very practical recommendations that were issued from the consultations. The first one was the added value of conducting tabletop exercises. We held one during the regional consultations, and it was a simulation exercise. And it was hailed as an effective tool that provides participants with the space to reflect on concrete means to operationalize principles. And the second one was the idea of developing a network of industry points of contact to keep this discussion ongoing with all relevant stakeholders. Last remark already mentioned by some other speakers, participants also emphasized the need to develop confidence building and transparency measures jointly with the industry, as well as capacity building measures such as training programs. These are the main takeaways I can share with you on these consultations. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephan, I'll come to you now. Thank you for your patience. Could you please share some perspectives on what you believe the role of regional organizations like the EU can have in enabling and facilitating responsible AI in the military domain, and perhaps elaborate on some of the best practices that the EU has developed in this field?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Giacomo. And I thank, first of all, of course, Spain for hosting us here today in this REAIM summit, which is very important, of course, because it's a multi-stakeholder process, and as all former speakers have been clearly showing that this issue, responsible AI in military field, is very important to look from different perspectives, and this process can ensure this, because we have to get out a bit of our silos in order to tackle these problems. And of course, for the European Union as such, which is, I speak a bit, as it was said earlier, from a sub-regional European perspective here, is a very important process. This is also proven by the fact that all EU member states have been signing up to REAIM from the beginning and have been participating in all earlier REAIM summits, and this will continue to be the case, and we will continue to support the REAIM initiative. And of course, in terms of tackling the issue of artificial intelligence, I think it's important, first of all, to look at the internal perspective. And here we have been engaged into what I would also call capacity building by having experts and institutions briefing EU member states and trying to developing these capacities. And in these informal sessions, we have gradually been building up the different aspects of AI in the military field, which is, of course, differentiated, I would say, into different subfields, like in the chemical, nuclear, biological area, but also in the conventional case, and many other applications. And I see that this capacity building has really led to some very positive perspective, and building this capacity have been relying on different activities and projects and different partners. UNIDIR has been a very important partner in this, but so has been the Stockholm Peace Research Institute. And in the EU, we have also used our, what we call the EU Internal Non-Proliferation Consortium, which is a kind of conglomerate of different think tanks, also to develop this capacity and have different projects going on in this regard. And I think this capacity building is now also been useful in exporting this to the outside, in working with other countries, and this has helped. But let me stress again that the importance is to really go to all these different stakeholders, be it industry, military, civil society, academia. I think this is really important to have this comprehensive approach. And also, of course, in the EU, we have not been kind of silent in developing our internal regulation. The EU is very much known in working strongly on the regulatory side. We have not developed any concrete legislative act to govern military use of artificial intelligence, but what was done, we have adopted maybe the most developed and elaborated Artificial Intelligence Act, which is to cover civilian use of artificial intelligence. But of course, since, as we all are aware, all these are dual-use phenomena, this has also a massive impact into the military applications. And this Artificial Intelligence Act, which was adopted in 2024 already, is really a harmonized rule of artificial intelligence parameters which are being used, and we have also been setting up in the EU a kind of artificial intelligence office to monitor the implementation of this subject. And this Artificial Intelligence Act is really a risk-based approach, of course, as is often the case, and is of course a part of a widespread package about how to support the governance on military use. And these measures, they should really ensure the kind of safe and approach on artificial intelligence which will preserve fundamental rights and ensure that there's a human-centric artificial intelligence approach. And maybe, of course, I should also mention here that from the European Union perspective, this is not kind of a one-dimensional approach. We are also looking, of course, at what is going on in the international field, in the UN context. I think earlier the discussions in the context of the CCW was mentioned, and the discussion on laws on lethal autonomous weapon systems. And here also we try, of course, to harmonize this with our approach. And maybe let me come to an end. I know I'm the last speaker of this segment. What is really central for the EU approach is, of course, that what kind of approach is chosen in artificial intelligence in military use, it has to be compatible with international law, and in particular international humanitarian law. And this is a long-standing EU position, and this is of course also compatible with this approach that there should be human control on artificial intelligence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephan, and thank all of you for sharing your perspectives. I think it's been a very interesting discussion to hear your views on how the consultations went. Just for the sake of completeness, there were 2 additional consultations that were conducted as part of this round, one in Seoul for East and Southeast Asia, and one that we held at UNHQ in New York for Latin America and the Caribbean. So the report that you see on screen does take into account also the insights that emerge from those consultations. Before we quickly reconfigure the stage for the next segment, I just would like to invite you to join me in thanking the excellent speakers for sharing with us their insight with a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. I will now invite Yasmin to take over the moderation role for the next segment and invite the next speakers to take up the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for staying with us for this session. So now I do invite our next speakers to join us on stage for a quick overview of the multi-stakeholder segment of the consultations. So I'll give them a second just to get settled. So this part of the session will be divided into segments. So we'll have a panel discussion with representatives of the multi-stakeholder community that took part in the regional consultations. And then finally, we'll have some reflections as well from the consecutive hosts of the REAIM Summit to really reflect back as well on the REAIM journey. So if I can also ask representatives of the Netherlands and also Republic of Korea to join us on stage. Thank you very much. We do have some reconfiguration to do with the stage, but also with respect to the timing, in order to ensure that we don't stand for too long between the session and also lunch. Thank you very much. So now we'll proceed with the quick panel discussion with the multi-stakeholder community. I'm really pleased to be joined by three excellent representatives of industry, academia, and civil society. So we have Michael Karimian, Director of Digital Diplomacy with Microsoft. We have Anum Khan from the CISS Islamabad. And also finally, we have Professor María de los Ángeles Fernández Grossetête, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, professor from the University of Chile. So all of them have attended the regional consultations, respectively, in the Asia-Pacific, West Asia, Middle East, and Latin America and Caribbean. And so I wanted to start with María for some quick reflections on something that you said during the consultations in New York. So one of the objectives of the REAIM regional consultation was to identify good practices for the international community. We asked that to states, but we also asked that with regards to multi-stakeholder community. And during our conversation, you mentioned the continued collaboration between the Chilean government and also the multi-stakeholder community to inform policy development processes. And that includes, for example, a new national strategy and policy on defense, which has a special emphasis on AI, among other topics of relevance to the military domain. So now that we've heard from states, I was wondering if you could share with us a few words from an academic perspective. What made this collaboration successful between the government and also academia? And what are some of the lessons and good practices that you would like to share with the international community and our audiences today? María, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Yasmin, for your remarks and for inviting us to this session. I'm very honored to be here. And regarding your question, Yasmin, I would first like to emphasize that Chile has an established culture of multi-stakeholder participation in the legislative process for bills and in the development of national strategies and policies. And much of this has been fostered by a citizen participation law that was enacted about 15 years ago, and that establishes that state recognizes the right of individuals to participate in its policies, plans, programs, and actions. And furthermore, it stipulates that government agencies must identify matters subject to public consultation, which must be informed, pluralistic, and representative. So, for example, recent legal initiatives that have incorporated multi-stakeholder participation were the AI bill that's still being discussed in the parliament, also the new data protection law or the new cybersecurity law. Additionally, with respect to policies, we have the National Policy of Artificial Intelligence, the National Cybersecurity Strategy, and the National Defense Policy. And to varying degrees, all these processes incorporated significant participation from diverse societal actors, academia, civil society organizations, relevant public institutions, and the private sector. And that's why I only have 5 minutes. Allow me to focus on the National Defense Policy, which is currently undergoing by a final review in the National Controller Office. And my first remark in this sense is that the national defense is conceived in this instrument fundamentally as a public good. And it is this principle, this conception, what the methodology that is employed for developing the policy seeks to reflect. So how do we do it? This policy was developed through a multi-stage process involving defense institutions, ministries, organized civil society, and the academia. And the stages, including developing a diagnosis, conducting discussions, generating inputs, and drafting and reviewing the final document. And in concrete terms, during the diagnosis stage, for example, comprehensive questionnaires were distributed to more than 100 individuals and institutions, including representatives from the defense sector, universities, experts, and ministries within the central administration. And also a series of thematic seminars were conducted in the National Academy of Political and Strategic Studies, where a structured dialogue sessions among civilians, military personnel, and specialists took place. And these forums provided the setting for a very in-depth discussions regarding changes in the strategic context that relates primarily, though not exclusively, to the use of AI in the military domain. And, well, additionally, a permanent expert working group was established with representatives from the Undersecretary of Defense, the Undersecretary of the Armed Forces, and other authorities from the defense. And this group continuously analyzed the diagnosis findings and shaped the context of the national policy. So I underscore that the multi-stakeholder participation that informed all this process appears essential for three interconnected reasons. First, the policy content, obviously, is enriched with the perspectives of all stakeholders involved. And here, the armed forces were vital actors in this regard because each branch already possessed knowledge and research and experience in the artificial intelligence matters. So this was very important. Also, this participation is crucial given the social implications of AI use in the military domain. And I mean by this that there is a need of a democratic legitimacy, and inclusive participation is one of the mechanisms through which this legitimacy is reinforced. And to close, this collaborative approach is also essential for ensuring the continuity of these instruments as state policies rather than merely governmental ones. And this distinction returns to the conception of national defense as a public good, thus closing the circle. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insights. So Michael, I would like to turn to you now. You took part in the Seoul regional consultations. One of the key takeaways from the consultation was that there is a perceived need for greater industry engagement, when we also heard that in the first part of the panel. And states are also asking for more structure for this kind of engagement, in acknowledgement that suppliers shape outcomes across the life cycle of the technology. But now, how can we ensure that the international community moves, and specifically for REAIM, away from just engaging industry to actually influencing what good looks like? What does good look like in practice from your perspective, and what does structured engagement with industries would require? Michael, over to you.
Thank you very much, Yasmin, and thank you to UNIDIR for its excellent and extensive work across the REAIM process. And of course, thank you to our host, the Government of Spain, Government of Foreign Affairs, European Union Cooperation, and the Ministry of Defense. Indeed, I had the opportunity to participate in the regional consultation hosted by the Republic of Korea last year. A colleague participated in the consultation in Nairobi, hosted by the Government of Kenya, and another colleague participated in the consultation hosted online and in Geneva. And at a high level, I think the consultation showed that there is now a very clear shift in the REAIM process from principles to operationalization, and also that industry participation only really matters when it's tied to outcomes, meaning that it helps states to specify, assess, and actually enforce credible expectations across the life cycle for AI-enabled military capabilities, but also that a structured approach, both for industry engagement and for responsible industry behavior, is actually the missing bridge between just engage in industry versus a more needed goal of we know what responsible industry behavior looks like and we can ask for it on a consistent basis. So in terms of the benefits of industry participation, I think there were numerous. One was a reality check on where governance and especially leverage within governance sits. So industry influences outcomes well before deployment. This includes design choices, data choices, all the way through to post-deployment maintenance and support. And consultations are one of the few settings in which states can pressure test what is feasible for standardization, doing that without compromising intellectual property or confidential matters. And again, this point on translating principles into implementation or implementable requirements, industry really has a role to play in helping to convert sometimes abstract concepts like lawfulness, safety, accountability, human control into concrete concepts where stakeholders can actually request them and evaluate them. And very importantly, there's the benefit of reducing asymmetry, especially for resource-constrained states. Many states, maybe even most states, actually don't have the opportunity or even the capacity to meet with industry and to interrogate them on a detailed basis. All of these benefits add up, I think, towards building trust and predictability, because structured dialogue really goes a long way towards reducing misaligned expectations. And that can help prevent a dynamic whereby states are either overreaching, so perhaps with unworkable demands, or under-asking, which I think leads to unchecked risks. There were a couple of takeaways that we heard across the regional consultations. States indeed do want more structure, not just more meetings. And so a consistent theme that came up again and again was what states can and should ask suppliers for, how to assess compliance claims credibly, and how are responsibilities allocated across the life cycle. So for states, industry, and civil society. This is a point that Pascale mentioned very eloquently. I think as well, to your question on what does good look like, I would look at it from the perspective of, well, we are here at the REAIM, Responsible AI in the Military Domain Summit. The consultations are exactly the same, so good should focus on responsible industry behavior in particular, and what that looks like in practice. And responsible industry behavior is lifecycle based. It's not just a moment in a consultation, it's not just a moment in the conversation at REAIM, it's an ongoing process. It exists before procurement, it exists during development, it exists in integration and deployment, and it exists in post-deployment too. And responsible behavior clarifies responsibility boundaries, and again, we need more focus on this. Again, as Pascale mentioned very effectively, states retain legal obligations and operational control decisions, whereas for industry players, we retain responsibility for product integrity, truthful claims, and responsible support, and civil society plays an essential role in helping to hold all stakeholders accountable. So ultimately, I think helping to structure responsible industry behavior is the right direction and the right priority for REAIM going forward. What that means for states is it reduces uncertainty about what they can ask and how to assess it. What that means for industry is it creates clearer, more predictable demand signals across countries. And for REAIM's own credibility, I think it demonstrates a movement from dialogue to implementation, but also produces outputs which are complementary to, not a substitute to, the emerging processes from the UN. So in the very end, the consultations made clear that the next step is not just more engagement, but it's very much about engagement that produces a shared, practical picture of what responsible industry behavior looks like, and that should be something that is life cycle based, evidence-based, modular, and usable by all stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Michael, for these very thoughtful comments. And last but not least, with regards to our multi-stakeholder participants, Anum, I would like to get to you. You were part of the regional consultations in Islamabad, and there has been quite a lot of emphasis on the risks that stem out of the convergence between AI and nuclear command, control, and communication systems at this particular regional consultations, and as the ambassador said, also because of the timing of the consultations in June. So I was wondering if you could perhaps share some of your thoughts drawing on the consultations, on the role of the multi-stakeholder community, and initiatives such as REAIM to help address these strategic issues. Anum, over to you.
I hope I'm audible. Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Dressed in blue, in solidarity with the REAIM consultations. It is a privilege to be here. First, I would roll back to nuclear command and control and communications and the use of AI in that nuclear domain. Although our focus has been on mainly decision-making, however, I think we have to also keep in mind how AI is indirectly impacting strategic stability across regions. And it is really important because it is not only about the decision-making, but it is also a step of processes after which a decision is made. So even in conventional sphere, even in dual capabilities, the role of AI is really important and has to be looked into. Now, if I come back to the discussions during the Islamabad regional consultations, that made a point which was really clear, that the convergence of AI with military decision-making, especially in systems linked with directly, and the way I said indirectly, to nuclear command and control and communications, is not a distant or theoretical aspect. It is an emerging reality, and it has very profound implications on strategic stabilities, especially for crisis-prone regions. Nuclear deterrence itself has historically relied on human judgment, political oversight, and deliberate decision-making. And these human elements, let me tell you, are not incidental at all. They are central to preventing escalation, managing crises, and preserving the strategic stability, and as well as opting for crisis resolution. So if this integration of AI in decision-making is at a faster pace than the crisis itself is folding, then I think it is going to be very dangerous across regions. For example, we saw the May 2025 short war, I call it short war personally. We saw that how the crisis escalation ladder was crossed quite early. So in that domain, if human decision-making or diplomacy is not at the exact fast pace as the crisis is unfolding, especially with the use of AI, that can be a very detrimental, that can have a very detrimental impact. So coming to the multi-stakeholders, as being myself a multi-stakeholder, there are some promises as well as some certain limitations. For example, during our regional consultations in Islamabad, it was stated that the multi-stakeholder engagement is indispensable for addressing the complex challenges posed by military use of AI, and the governments alone cannot manage these threats. For example, industry, we have people from industry here. They design and deploy technologies. Academia and technical experts, they have an important role to play. They understand the limitations and failures of different modes. And what does civil society do? Civil society is very important to raise ethical, humanitarian, and societal concerns. And especially if you're looking at nuclear weapons, the impact of, God forbid, a use of nuclear weapon would not be limited to just states. Everybody would be involved. So that is why it is really important to bring all these multi-stakeholders, in which REAIM is already doing a great job. Another important aspect, if I may, is that today's global AI ecosystem, particularly advanced compute, foundational models, safety tooling, and dual-use applications is overwhelmingly concentrated in the global north. Majority technology companies that shape AI architectures, standards, and other development pathways, they are largely headquartered in the global north. And because of this, many states in global south focus on or are impacted with structural asymmetries in access, participation, and influence. And here I would like to really congratulate the REAIM consultations that they have tried to bring together the global south perspective as well as the global north perspective. So this overall can create an asymmetry. It is not merely a developmental issue, it is a security concern for crisis-prone regions, the way Ambassador Bilal already mentioned that South Asia is one of the nuclear flashpoints. If the responsible AI practices, safety mechanisms, and government frameworks become a luxury good, accessible only to technologically advanced states, the result will be fragmented. Lastly, I would talk about the REAIM's value as a bridging platform. REAIM, as I already said, provides a platform to governments, industry, academia, civil society, and it is often difficult to sustain such dialogue, but REAIM really did a good job. It is very important to bring these consultations to informal discussions, which can then feed the United Nations and other processes. So REAIM, what is REAIM doing? REAIM can serve as an incubator, helping identify the areas, which already it is doing, and it should continue to do so, identify the areas of emerging consensus, develop shared vocabularies, and translate technical insight, which can then help the policy-relevant recommendations to be given to the UN processes. I'm sorry if I hope, yeah, just the last point here is that there needs to be equity, capacity building, and shared responsibility regarding knowledge sharing, equitable access, and it is very important to use AI for peaceful purposes as well. So we need to be really understanding of the fact that AI has both positive and negative uses. Constraints for AI in military domain should not hamper the use of AI in a civil domain, and also the access should not hamper the access of Global South to AI developments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anum, for these thoughtful comments. So now I would like to take us to the final segment of the session, where we will be kind of reflecting as well this format of the regional consultations to reflect on the REAIM journey. So I'm very pleased to be joined by two consecutive hosts of the previous summits. So I have Jiyoung, Director of Disarmament and Non-Proliferation Division of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea, and also Emma Verhoeff, Team Lead New Technologies for the Security Policy Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So now Jiyoung, as the hosts of the previous edition of the summit, 18 months ago in Seoul, and looking back, what has been the role of the 2025 regional consultations in carrying over the principles captured in the blueprint for action? And to what extent have you observed progress, and where is there room for further work? And lastly, perhaps, what evolution have you observed since the organization of the 2024 REAIM Summit? Jiyoung, over to you. María.
Thank you. Thank you, UNIDIR, for organizing this session and having me here. So I'm very pleased to share our reflections on the second REAIM Summit, which was held in Seoul in 2024, and how this was developed and applied to the regional consultation last year. So in 2024, for the summit, we set out 3 key objectives, which guided the design of the sessions and the drafting of the outcome document, the blueprint for action. So first, we aim to enhance the international community's understanding of military application of AI by clarifying both the potential benefits and associated risk. Second, we also sought to explore and identify foundational principles for the responsible use of AI in the military domain. And we hoped this would have some kind of groundwork for international consensus on emerging norms on this agenda. And lastly, we aimed for the REAIM to continue to serving as a platform for fostering active international cooperation and contributing to the development of international governance in this domain. So I was very lucky to be involved in 2024 and 2025 regional consultations. I would say that the key difference between the two was their primary focus. So the 2024 regional consultation were largely aimed at further introducing this agenda and finding some possible shared principles for responsible application of AI in the military domain, reflecting national perspectives from diverse regions. But since the second REAIM Summit, one key observation was that the use of AI in the military domain increased, and the technology continues to advance. We are also seeing some progress in efforts to ensure its responsible use with general principles while observing different national perspectives or security concerns. So the discussion therefore shifted toward more practical questions, in particular, how to operationalize the principles identified in the blueprint for action with an inclusive manner, and how to meaningfully engage industry and other key stakeholders in this process. As such, the 2025 regional consultation placed an emphasis on implementation-oriented discussion for each region. So how to operationalize the principles of responsible application of AI in the military domain on the ground. And I believe that this served as a foundation to shape the third REAIM Summit, including the outcome documents. And another clear takeaways from the second summit was the importance of multi-stakeholder engagement. So reflecting this, as Mike also mentioned, in close coordination with our RAISE initiative, 2025 REAIM regional consultation included a dedicated tabletop exercise involving both public and private stakeholders, and an optional one-day multi-stakeholder discussion for delegation who wished to deep dive into this agenda from multi-stakeholder approach. So overall, many countries access this regional consultation is very timely and useful as a platform for exchange, but also as a kind of stepping stone toward continued cooperation and practical implementation based on the inclusivity in this agenda of AI in the military domain. And again, we very much appreciate the active contribution to the REAIM process, all the participants, including our panelists and guests here. So with that, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jiyoung. So last but not least, Emma, I would like to get to you now, because as host of the first edition of the summit 3 years ago, and having now witnessed the evolution of 2 editions of the regional consultations, if we look ahead, what do you foresee is the role of the regional consultations for the future of REAIM? And what are some of the good practices that you can draw from the regional consultations for the wider international community, particularly in the light of the emerging work done under the auspices of the first committee? Emma, over to you.
Thank you, Yasmin, for having me in this panel. It's an excellent discussion so far. And also let me congratulate you for your publication. I think it's a very good piece of work. And to UNIDIR in general for your contribution over the last years in having the regional consultations be so successful. And also I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Spain, the government of Spain, for hosting us here in A Coruña and having the third summit. It's only 3 years ago that we hosted the summit in the Netherlands, and it's pretty remarkable to see what has happened and what regional consultations have been taking place, the discussions, also what we just learned from the previous speakers. I think really a lot has happened on different levels, both industry, but also the expert level and the governance in the regional areas. Maybe 4 elements I would like to highlight that we feel that the regional consultations really help in contributing to this process. First is that the regional consultations help localize the global discussions. It helps to translate the global REAIM agenda into specific regional and cultural context. I think our distinguished speaker from Pakistan also really very well elaborated on that point. All the differences in security environments, technological capacities, and governance structures, they come to play in the regional consultations. Second, the fact that the regional consultations help building trust and networks. They provide opportunities for defense officials, for policymakers, for experts to directly engage with each other. This helps building trust among neighboring states, and I think that's a concrete added value in itself already. Then third, the regional consultations help, and that's actually what we see happening here, help the REAIM process at the global level. The insights from the regional consultations, they are taken on board under the REAIM summit and the summit outcomes. And I think this is also what we just saw in the previous discussion. The issues that are being dealt with during the regional consultations are being taken on board at the level of the summit. Then the last one, strengthening capacity. I think it's also one of the points that really stood out in the previous discussion, that is an element that is really important and that the regional consultations really help in building. They equip states with better awareness and technical knowledge, which has a high impact So what this all means for the developments, REAIM as an incubator, that has been said several times. That's something that's how we also saw the start of this process, a multi-stakeholder process, having industry, experts, governments sit together, discuss the topics, and improve the agenda that we really need to work on all together. We have also the work at the UN level, and somehow what we do here at the REAIM processes, it feeds into the UN level, and we really would like to continue work on that with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. And before I close off the session, two things. So very first, those that just joined us in the middle of the session, please do download the report that summarizes everything from the 2025 regional consultations. And secondly, please join me in giving a round of applause for our eminent speakers. Thank you very much.
Hello? Oh, there we go. Sorry, just a quick reminder, we now have our lunch break, and we will be back in this auditorium for plenary session number 2, applications of AI in the military domain, at 2 p.m. So in roughly 45 to 50 minutes, and enjoy your lunch, and I hope you had a productive morning. Thank you.